Here's Brody Brazil.
Hey there, welcome back to the channel, and a little change of pace here going from baseball to the upcoming hockey season. This is the 2023-24 season preview for the San Jose Sharks. And when I hear that 3-4 year combo, like 23-24, it instantly brings me back to 93-94. That was this team's first season at their current home, the Tank, formerly San Jose Arena, Compact Center, HP Pavilion, and now SAP Center. But you think about the trajectory of this franchise for so many years and all the success they've had. Certainly, current times are different, but it puts in perspective how fast life and sport both go. Does it seem like 30 years ago that they were in their first season at the Tank and then faced the Red Wings in their first ever playoffs and beat them? The famous Jamie Baker goal as part of that series. So time flies when you're having a good time. This is the 23-24 campaign that we're about to dive into here. Let's begin with the big picture. Starting with last season, where this team left off, 22-44-16 was their record. 16 overtime losses. Now, on one hand, you do get points for those games. On the other hand, you were maybe that close to getting 2 points and winning some of those games, whether they were in overtime or in the shootout. Those 16 overtime losses set a team record of how many times they went into bonus hockey and then lost the game. Of the 22 wins, most of them were on the road, only 8 home wins for the team last year, which set a new franchise record. And we'll talk more about the home ice advantage, how to get it back, where things went wrong at the Tank last season. The team had their fourth worst win percentage, I should say, in the National Hockey League last year, fourth worst record. And it turned out with the lottery draft, they ended up getting Will Smith with the 4th overall pick. I understand people were surprised how Chicago got the first pick, and everybody hoped that for San Jose, the Connor Bedard Fest. But instead, got to be pretty happy with Will Smith, despite where the team finished. Yeah, very rough season last year. They're now on a 4-season drought since making the playoffs in 2019. And that year, they went all the way to the Western Final, right? Beat the Golden Knights in that famous Game 7, beat the Avs, a very tough Colorado team, in the second round, and then got beat by St. Louis. And I think in that series, they had a 2-1 advantage. Tables turned, and then the team was eliminated. 5 players remain from that 2018-2019 team. So there's not a lot of guys in that room that have the experience of being on the Sharks and being in the playoffs. And later on, we'll talk about how this season has to be a stop looking back campaign. This is a totally new team. Granted, those 5 players excluded, new coaching staff, new front office, mostly new players. So this has to be a season where you really stop looking back, and especially with the trade into last year of Burns, the trade into this season of Karlsson to Pittsburgh. You really have to stop looking back and start looking forward, because it's getting close to an almost clean slate for Team Teal. On that note, personnel-wise, let's look at the roster changes. I'm not going to go through every player here, obviously. A bunch of additions and a bunch of departures. The one common trend, looking at the left and right-hand side of the screen here, is that it does seem like the Sharks went for more established, veteran, known commodities, as opposed to some of the departures who were maybe up and coming, or you didn't know how they'd pan out. Obviously, Erik Karlsson here being at the bottom of the list, he's got his own section on this season preview, because we do need to talk about what taking away a big piece like that does from last season to this season. There is an effect of that, but looking at this in one big picture versus individually here, yeah, it does seem like with Hoffman and Granlund and Ruta and Zadina and Burrows, there are players here with experience, and maybe the Sharks are valuing that a little bit more in terms of this year's team, or maybe even taking some of those players if they have a good season and flipping them for draft picks. I don't think there's any question. The Sharks, they need their pipeline to be even stronger than it is now. Not in a terrible spot at this point, but it still needs to get stronger for a couple more years to come. So those are the roster changes in one big glance. Anthony Duclair, one of the newcomers for the Sharks this year. He's got 9 NHL seasons under his belt. The Sharks will be his 7th team. That's amazing. 6 different teams across 9 seasons, and mostly out east is where he spent his career. Has played a little bit out west, but a guy who's been around the block. Changing teams again, you'd have to think is no big deal. He has been in the last 3 Stanley Cup playoffs, all with the Florida Panthers, and yes, he was part of the Stanley Cup final this past year in 2023. It was a really weird 22-23 campaign for him. Last summer, injured his Achilles, sat out most of the year, only played 20 regular season games in 23, and I think he actually played 20-something playoff games. So more playoff games for Duclair last year than actually regular season games. 490 under his belt, so mid-career, you might look at him as a silver stick type guy eventually. A pure winger, and had some success with the Panthers, a .72 points per game mark across the last 3 years. So again, even with the injury and some ups and downs, like almost a point per game player on a very good Panther team. And mind you, getting points per game on a really good team, I know that you'd think, well, that's easy. You're a good team. Other players will find you. You'll score more offense. I think it's harder when there's more mouths to feed. It's harder to have a higher points per game on a team where there's so many threats. Like, there's only one puck, right? Not everybody can score it every single time. So I've been told that Anthony Duclair, really good guy inside the dressing room, is really going to be a part of culture in San Jose as much as on the ice success. Really looking forward to the Duke coming to the South Bay and see what he brings to the team. So that's just one addition I wanted to point out. Here is obviously the big subtraction that we got to talk about. Erik Karlsson, after a lot of talk of potential trades and suitors, and it got narrowed down to just a couple teams, he is now a Pittsburgh Penguin. But last season, as a team, the Sharks tallied 636 points. Erik Karlsson accounted for 101 of those. So let's just call it 1 out of every 6 points that the team registered belonged to him. Won the Norris Trophy, cracked triple digits as a D-man, for the first time a player did since, the 90s, I think. Won his 3rd Norris Trophy. I think I said that already, but it was a big cornerstone of this team. 25-37 time on ice. He led all other skaters in that category by like a 2-minute margin. He was constantly out there, facilitating other players, helping Timo Meier get the first half of his season started. A lot of times last year we said, where would the Sharks be without Erik Karlsson? And I think we said that rhetorically, knowing that they would not be in a good place. Already a lot of times last in the standings or near last in the league by the end of the campaign. But obviously, we're going to find out what this is like for the Sharks without Karlsson. Sorry, I'm distracted, by the way. I just realized I had all these sound effects, and I forgot to play them at the start of this preview. I'm not going to go back and record this again, but feeling like pizza? Or is it tacos these days? Tacos. So, how many times will the Sharks get those 4 goals in a home game to get you free tacos or whatever the promotion is these days? See, I tied that in there. How many times will you hear this? Right? By the way, at the end of this video, don't let me forget to do that like the end of every period. Sorry. Distracted. The Sharks now, minus Karlsson, are at a phase where they don't really have a true offensive-minded defenseman. Like for the first time since the Dan Boyle era, the late 2000s. You always had Boiler, and then you had Boiler and Bernsey and Karlsson. And now you've got none of that. So the dynamic of this Sharks team changes. They don't have a blue liner that's really going to, push the puck up the ice. I mean, I think Karlsson last year was the master of the stretch pass. And, getting a rush going, feeding his wingers. A lot to find out about this Sharks team. Make no mistake that they had to do this move, though. So I know what people are saying. Well, you're painting a pretty negative picture here about this move. No, it had to happen. It had to free up the salary cap space. I think the Sharks are going to be about $4 million under right now, and it's not even this year. It's the next year, the year after that. He had 4 more years left on his deal. But it's the trade-off of right now versus making your team a little bit more challenged to score, right? Minus Karlsson. But what does this do for the roster, the franchise in those later years? The flexibility of next season or the one after that when they really need to retain the players they want or bring in more players. And I think Karlsson saw it and the team saw it. This was the most mutual, hey, we're going to try and get you traded here type situation that I've seen in sports in the last 10, 15 years. Both sides were trying to make this happen. Both sides respected each other and understood that it would take some time. So Erik Karlsson traded to Pittsburgh. Okay, the Sharks last season, special teams, power played 18.3%. It was 25th in the league. Not great. The penalty kill, that actually hovered top 5 for a lot of the season. It ended up at 82.3%, which was 8th overall. The PK was really good. The penalty kill, quite honestly, helped the Sharks be a little bit more aggressive when they took a penalty. They didn't always have to pay for it. They were solid. When you add up the special teams, the old math is to try and get your power play and PK percentages to add up to 100. Well, in this case, they do. Like exactly 100 or just a little bit above. So we'll take it, right? But can you rely on your PK, again, being that good? But can your power play be just a little bit better? I think that's the area that's lacking for the Sharks. And again, it's not to say that one costs the other, but special teams and the players you use on the PK versus the PP, it's all related in some way, shape, or form. As a coach with your roster and the players you use and how you choose to use them. So without Karlsson, and obviously being 2 years removed from Brent Burns, does the power play get restructured a little bit? Does the puck always come back out to the point? If you don't have an offensive-minded defenseman, will the power play look a little bit different knowing the tools the Sharks do and don't have? And could that benefit them? Could that get them to, I mean, even if they're like, take the PK at 82% again, which I would, and let's say the power play even gets up to 20%. 21 if I want to be a little bit greedy here. A couple more goals a game, going back to those 16 overtime losses. Yeah, that's a difference. Again, imagine if the Sharks had 8 fewer overtime losses and just had wins in those games and got 2 points in all of those games. It's a different story. On the penalty kill, obviously with Kakinen as one netminder, Mackenzie Blackwood comes over from the Devils, 143 games in Jersey, a .906 save percentage and a .297 goals against. He's had all his NHL experience with New Jersey. He's going to be important. He never really took the reins full-time as like an every-game starter. I think the most he started a couple years ago, like a little more than half the season. So we'll see how the workload goes. Is it a tandem? Is it a ride the hot hand? It's weird. You know, I kind of go back to my earliest years covering the Sharks, and, you know, Nabby would get 70 starts, and maybe Thomas Greiss would get the other dozen, or even Niemi all those years. He would do the bulk lifting, or even in the Martin Jones era. You could expect him to make at least 2/3 of the starts. So we are still kind of in that platoon idea, I think, for San Jose. But look, the goalie's got to be the best penalty killer. So hopefully Blackwood can contribute to keeping that PK rolling. Another chapter here I'm looking forward to with the Sharks is the young group. How about Slick Willie and Tommy Boy? That's so bad. I just made that up, and I don't even like that. Like Slick Willie, like William Eklund. Tommy Boy, like Thomas Bordelot. Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. I think I just ruined the video. Look, this has to be, after up and down and here and out, this has got to be their season, right? To see how they last over 82 games. And they've got some experience and they've got some taste of all this. I hope for them that this is their season where they just do it. And you know what? I don't want to say throw the stats aside. I wish them success, obviously, but I want to see them start and finish a season. And yeah, have some steps along the way. They're kind of that youngest group. Then you've got the next group of young players, Nico Sturm and Barabanov. If you can get those two to find a way to contribute to the next level, and we've seen flashes from both of them. And obviously the eyes are on Will Smith, wherever he ends up being this year, throughout the season. You know, it matters all of a sudden, like, to keep your eyes on the pipeline even more. Now, we've been doing that with the Barracuda and obviously Eklund and Bordelot when they were not on the Sharks, but especially on a 4th overall draft pick like Will Smith. How does he go? How does the development go? How does his season go? A player like Filip Zadina came over from the Red Wings. He was a 6th overall draft pick a handful of years ago. He recently stated in an international publication he thought Detroit actually rushed him a little bit, and that maybe had set him back. So maybe the Sharks have found something here in Zadina, a player that could also contribute. This is obvious, right? And there are so many more names than just the ones here on your screen. I can only fit so many on here. But what the young group does at this point is more important than veteran leadership and, you know, keeping the room together. And yeah, there will be lessons to be had along the way, but this young group, how they start, how they execute, and how they finish a season is important as anything else for the Sharks this year, because it is their future, no doubt about it. So let's talk about the big picture here, the outlook for the Sharks in this season. I don't want to say it's a no-pressure situation because, yeah, those young players need to develop, but there are low external expectations. I've heard already people say, well, will they finish last or second to last in the division? Like, what's Anaheim going to do? They're still aiming to compete. Like, this goes without saying, but, you know, some teams, when they look at their upcoming year and they're maybe not ready and they still want to put, if the Sharks hadn't gone out and acquired some of those veterans, that tells me they're not aiming to compete. But they did. And they still might surprise a few this year. Who knows? And to what degree? Can they win 10 more games? Can they be that much better? I don't know. But this is not, to me, a team that's just passing along a season to get to their future sooner. This is a team that's largely aiming to compete. Will they be able to? We'll find out. For Greer and Quinn, second year at the helm in respective GM positions and behind the bench. By the way, I love the saying I've seen, I think, on social, GMMG, as in General Manager Mike Greer. I don't know, that just goes together so well. GMMG. But Greer and Quinn, I think it's got to be said. And now looking back, you know, more than a year into their time with the Sharks, when they took over, it's like building a house. If you're going to build a new house, you'd like to start on a nice graded, level plot of land. I think it's safe to say that they took over a pretty big hole in the ground. Some contracts, some players, some situations, some restrictions, handcuffed in so many ways. You know, the Sharks being successful for a decade plus of the 2000s and beyond, 2010s, I should say, and beyond, it catches up with you. Look at the Red Wings. They kind of went through it too. Draft picks, trades you made, you're behind the curve. So they're still working to get where they need to be. I think that's very clear. And I think that also predicts that you should expect even more changes ahead. This franchise is not done making moves, and I'm not going to sit here and spin the rumor mill at all. I'm really not going to, but there's not a trade this team could make that would totally surprise me, if that makes sense. Nothing would come out of the blue, I guess, at this point. They go into the year with about, as I record this, with about $4 million of cap space. And I said before, the low external expectations. This is the most loaded division in the NHL, where there are 4 100-point teams. I think 4 100-point teams in the Pacific. And oh yeah, who won the Stanley Cup? Las Vegas. So it's going to be a tough go-around in the Sharks' own division this year. And that's why their young players are going to get a true test on a pretty regular basis. So what's the aim of this season then? What do you hope to accomplish? Well, like I said at the top, this has to be a look forward campaign. Enough about the past. Honestly, enough about the playoff drought. You're 4 years in, kind of doesn't matter if it's going to be 5 or even 6. Figure out the next players that are going to emerge. That's actually down here on my list. The emergence of clear pieces. We'll get to that one in a second. Obviously, leaders have to be leaders. The captain, Tomas Hertl, who, by the way, looks in tremendous shape. And I don't think he was in bad shape before, but seeing him in his summer workouts over in the Czech on Instagram and social, I mean, he looks like he has been putting in the work. So I really hope for a rejuvenated season from 48 this year. I know Logan is, frustrated in a sense that he always wants to win, but I think he realizes where he's at right now, and his role with this franchise is to be a leader. Duclair's not coming in to bring a bad vibe at all. The Sharks I think there's 2 big things here. Well, 3 in total that are left, but 2 big things here. Be a tough opponent. Be an opponent so that the other team looks at your record, and that part doesn't matter. I think last year, a lot of times, the Sharks were not a tough opponent in games. We let one up early, and it kind of felt like, all right, the game is already decided. And they would score 1 maybe in the second period, but by that point, down 3-1, and then just silent for the final period. Be a tough opponent. Also, have some clear pieces emerge. I'd love to know, like, okay, here's a new, young, known commodity. Like, is William Eklund a franchise player? And I don't mean that he has to be one this season, but can he show us that, oh, he's going to be in a couple of years, or Bordelot or anybody else? Again, I bring up those 2. They're going to be the thumbnail, I think, of this video, which you've already probably seen, but they're kind of the front men of that young next core. And last but not least here, I mean, this goes to strategy on the ice, but this also goes to the Sharks as a business, as an entity, as something that I want to see do well again. And that is to get your home ice advantage back. Win where you're supposed to win. Get right at home. They're going to have some sustained homestands this year. And it also goes like this. People that come to hockey games, and obviously the attendance has been down in recent years, you win people over by giving them a really good showing on home ice. So yes, it helps your record, but also yes, it helps your business because people say, well, you know what? I had a really good time there. The Sharks beat Toronto. So I got to see the Leafs and I got to see the Sharks beat them. Get your home ice advantage back, which is unexplainable because last year, how did that slip to just 8 wins? 8 of 22 wins on home ice. Tied a franchise record, a franchise low. But that's got to be a big part of next season, this upcoming season, is to win more at the tank. Okay, I've been dealing with the raspy voice, and I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end of this video, and just kind of a real preliminary season preview for 23-24. I'll let you know a couple things I'm working on in the near future for this YouTube channel. Maybe a little Randy Hahn chat, maybe a little Brett Hedican chat, maybe a little Drew Remenda chat, maybe even a little Curtis Brown chat. Curtis, who's leaving us after all these years. We'll get into that. Maybe you forgot or haven't heard. Probably haven't heard. But a little more than a month ago, Curtis announced that he's moving on to a new opportunity in Nebraska and is not going to be my Robin. That's right. Batman is minus Robin. But I'll chat with Curtis in the near future. We'll have that full conversation and update here on the channel. So thanks for making it here to the end. Thumbs up down below if you liked this preview. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel. Yeah, lots more Sharks content and everything else coming your way in the coming months.